I think a lot of people are switching from Adobe Premiere to Davinci Resolve for many different reasons, but here are my top 5 reasons why I switched. Hey guys, thank you for clicking on this video and for watching. I have been a long-time video editor. I've been working on learning NLE, or non-linear editing software, for, I would say, probably 6 to 7 years now. I've been working on it for a very long time. And I've used programs like Adobe Premiere, I've used HitFilm, I've used and now Davinci Resolve, and way back in the day I used Windows Movie Maker. Shout out to anybody who had used that too. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of things that bugged me about the majority of the software that I previously had used. So to start off, HitFilm, which is created by FX Home, it's great software, don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed using it, but one of the things that I really struggled with that was it wasn't efficient. At the time, this was 2014, I had downloaded HitFilm Express, their free version, and I had just purchased a brand new desktop computer. It had I think it was like a 4th gen quad-core i7 and a GTX 960, which at the time was fairly reputable hardware. I spent about $1,000 on that machine. But what I ran into was it wasn't very efficient. It didn't work very well with video codecs, and I had a Canon Rebel that I was working with that footage, and it just didn't work well. As soon as you started to put effects or anything on it, it would slow down, and maybe things have changed since then. But I used that for quite a while. I used it for a couple of years actually, and then I switched to Adobe Premiere because during that process I had sold my desktop computer. I purchased a laptop of a similar caliber, and I didn't see much I didn't see an improvement in performance. And then I went to an Ultrabook instead of a full laptop. I was trying to downsize and get something smaller and desktop experience from a small machine, plug it in with one cable, that sort of thing. That's what I was going for. I think it was a Razer Blade. And about that time I switched to Adobe Premiere, and the performance gains that I saw were fantastic. It worked with video codecs way more efficiently. It just even on that machine, which had like a dual core processor and 8 gigs of RAM, it did quite well. But there were still a few things that, after using Adobe Premiere for a while, I ran into some more issues. So anyway, back to my 5 reasons why I actually ended up sticking with Davinci Resolve and why I fully switched over to Davinci Resolve. And reason number 5 is because of efficiency. I actually have a project pulled up here, and those of you who work with video may be familiar with Sony codecs and how notoriously inefficient they are, especially like in programs like Adobe Premiere. I actually work for a media production company, and it's a $9,000 workstation. It has a RTX Titan. It's got 32 gigs of RAM. It's got a AMD Threadripper, 32 core 64 thread processor. It's all the bells and whistles, even down to the RGB RAM. But what I noticed is when working with Sony codecs, if I'm working with like a 1080p 120 footage at 100 megabits, it still occasionally will bog down or slow down. In fact, I had an instance the other day where I had a clip that I had reversed, color graded, and then added a warp stabilizer, and then I had nested it so that I could slow it down, and then I think I did one more thing too. I added like a blur effect, and even on that $9,000 workstation, I could not play it back in real time. I had dropped frames. Until I rendered the video, I didn't actually know what that scene fully looked like. So in DaVinci Resolve, one thing I've noticed is my current system, it's a Ryzen 5 3600. It's a 6-core 12-thread, and it has a GTX 1660 Super. So mid-range hardware. I spent about $800 on it total. 16 gigs of RAM. So it's not an all-powerful system, but the footage that I work with, it handles very, very well. You know, this is 100 megabit Sony codec footage. This is graded. This has time remapping on it. This has warp stabilization. I guess in DaVinci Resolve it's just called stabilization, but it has stabilization applied to it, and it's very, very efficient. I've been very pleased with how efficient it is. I rarely get dropped frames, and it's just a pleasure to use. And you can see here I'm playing back, and I'm even running a screen recording software while I'm showing you this, and it's still handling it like a champ. It doesn't drop frames. It plays back nice and smooth, and when I scrub through, it displays the frame that I'm on very quickly, so I know exactly where my playhead is in the timeline, and it does quite well. I can even play it back at ×2 speed or ×4 speed, and it does quite well. So that's number 5. Reason number 4 is DaVinci Resolve is free. Now, I'm a big fan of paying for what you know, supporting companies and paying for what you use. But there are a lot of people who don't want to drop, you know, 20, 30, 40, even close to $100 a month on, you know, Creative Suite software bundles. They only need a limited amount of function. They don't need it. They don't need all the fancy features. And having DaVinci Resolve, at least the free version, be available to literally almost anybody, making it free, I think is an excellent way to give creators the tools they need to create. As far as I know, they don't plan on changing their business model. DaVinci Resolve has actually been free software for quite some time. It's just they've more recently got into the nonlinear video editing space. You know, originally this was color grading software, which I will talk about. But that's another thing that I really, really love about DaVinci Resolve is it's free. And because it's free and because I love it so much, I do plan on purchasing it once the need arises to, you know, to unlock the features that I do need, like denoising and among others. But yeah, reason number 4, definitely because it's free. I love that, and I love that business model of getting more people involved in creative work and being able to produce awesome content. Reason number 3 actually is similar to reason number 4 of it being free, is Blackmagic Design as a company and their business model. Something that I've noticed, and this is an anecdote, I don't know, exactly what they're talking about in their boardrooms, but I've noticed that they're making DaVinci Resolve free, and then they're also selling great hardware. So Blackmagic Design has been in the hardware space for a long time, professional video equipment, between monitors and video converters and that sort of thing. We have a lot of Blackmagic Design products that I use professionally at work too for like live production. But that business model of creating free software and also creating hardware that's quality. The Blackmagic, the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K and Pocket Cinema Camera 6K are both excellent entry-level cameras, and they do have proprietary video codecs that work especially well with their software, but I can't really argue with them for doing that because, well, you can choose to record in regular codecs as well, like H.264, and can't remember if it supports any other pro codecs, but I know it supports consumer codecs as well. But you can't argue with them because their software is free. So if you purchase a $1,200 or $2,500 Blackmagic Cinema camera, Pocket Cinema camera, and you use their proprietary codec, it's not a huge deal because you can just download free software to then manipulate it and have all of that power for free. Now, to be fair, I believe that if you purchase a Pocket Cinema camera, you do get a license to their studio software, which actually leads me quite nicely into reason number 2 as to why I switched to DaVinci Resolve. And that is that when you purchase DaVinci Resolve Studio, it is $300 at the time of making this video. And at the time of making this video, when you purchase it, you own it. No monthly subscription garbage. There's none of this. It's you save up and you purchase it as a product. It's not software as a service. It's a product that you purchase, similar to their other products, right? You purchase a camera, you own it. You don't rent it for, you know, $15 a month or whatever. So that's reason number 2. Finally, reason number 1. Davinci Resolve was a color grading software first and a NLE second. And now it looks like they're definitely beefing up their NLE features as well. But you know, Davinci Resolve was used on movies like The Dark Knight, among others. It was used in the professional space for color grading, and their color tools are just absolutely, it's like perfection. They're just so good. And I'll actually show you some of the you know, things that I love so much about the color tab. So, for example, here's a good example of some of the things that I love about the color tab. First of all, you have your color wheels, and it gives you very granular controls over the colors and the tones and the shadows. And I've talked about this in my previous videos, but I just love the amount of control that it gives you. So for example, in this particular scene, what I have done here is I've just created a couple of different nodes and assigned them different tasks. And the amount of power that's in Davinci Resolve is so great, because, you know, it simplifies it in a way that it does take there's a bit of a learning curve. It's not perfect as far as, you know, being able to just pick it up and go right away, but it is so useful. And at work I use Adobe Premiere, and I found that color grading S-Log footage, which is what this is my Sony A7III footage in S-Log, I found that color grading this was significantly harder in Adobe Premiere for me than it was in Davinci Resolve. To get it to look good in Davinci Resolve was actually quite a bit easier. And in a separate video, I'm going to cover one of the things that makes this just so easy and so nice to use, and that's the power window feature. But yeah, reason number 1 for why I absolutely have switched to Davinci Resolve, and for the foreseeable future, that's, you know, I'm going to preach to the top of my lungs about how much I love Davinci Resolve, is the color tab. The color tab is just so powerful. You have access to scopes, you have access to your color wheels, you have snapshots, which are basically just little LUTs that you can pull from your project, and you can see here if I hover over them, it can give it a different look. And you have your nodes, which have a ton of potential, which, you know, I've only learned to scratch the surface of. And you have your curves and your qualifier, and you have just so many ways to be able to make your footage look the absolute best that it can look. Even if you don't shoot in the right white balance, you can make it look pretty darn good in the color tab. So thanks again for watching. I really appreciate you, and if you enjoy this video, if you want to see more content like this, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks again.